Today, I am pretty sure, is Tuesday, the 13th of October, in the 28th week of Ordinary Time. And of course, we know these times are anything but ordinary. They are indeed biblical in proportion. So we have a hard-hearted Pharaoh. We have a plague that includes flies and disease and death. We have other signs of abnormal times. We have fires and floods and violence. A friend of mine said recently, God is doing an awful lot of smiting these days. And there's a meme that's been circulating of a young black woman. She comes outside, she's sort of squinting into the future and saying, what book of Revelation are we doing today? So, today's gospel fits right in. It's part of an increasingly heated conversation that Jesus is having with the scribes and Pharisees, in which he warns them multiple times. I think it's 6 in Luke's gospel, 8 in Matthew's, about the dire consequences of their hypocrisy. Woe to you, woe to you, woe. It certainly feels like a time of reckoning, a moment of truth. But many of us in these out of ordinary times miss those rituals that mark time in the seasons, that help consecrate, bless, hallow time, that point to the sacredness of our relationships, the weekly Sabbath, communion, the markings of beginnings and endings, signified in baptisms, weddings, funerals. So it might seem like a bit of a disconnect as we read today's readings from Paul's letter to the Galatians and the Gospel of Luke, where we're being chastised, or those who put too much stock in religious rites and laws are being chastised, those more concerned with laws of purity than with purity of heart. And then there seems to be a curious juxtaposition with the responsorial psalm, which praises the glories of God's law, using every imaginable synonym for law, decrees, ordinances, precepts, commands, statutes, so on. Well, then what are we to do in times like these that seem to call out for some kind of rhythm or ritual, for a sanctifying grace or two? The ancient biblical prophets help me to make sense of what it means to both love God's law and to hold loosely to the rituals prescribed by it. And there's the famous passage from Micah, chapter 6, where the question's asked, what sort of offering does the law require? Does the Lord and the law require? Thousands of rams, 10,000 rivers of oil, my firstborn? And the response, he has told you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? But to do justice and to love kindness and to walk humbly with your God. And then there's the way Jeremiah talked about the law. I will put my law within them, and I will write it on their hearts, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. No longer shall they teach one another or say to one another, know the Lord, for they shall all know me, from the least of them to the greatest, says the Lord. For I will forgive their iniquity and remember their sin no more. So perhaps all of these signs that we're experiencing, all these times of trial and tribulation, offer us a time of reckoning, a time to take a hard look at what is in our heart, at how we're treating our earth and each other, to take stock, to focus on what is at the heart of things. A time of reckoning to revive and reimagine our life with God and with each other. The ancient practice of time reckoning, in which the hours and days and seasons were noted and marked for the purpose of ritual, is something each of us has probably been engaged in during this pandemic. We've become more intentional about carving out time for quiet, for prayer, for meditation, for reflection. We've participated in home liturgies, joined breaking bread liturgies on Zoom, streamed masses from all over the world, prayed the morning and evening liturgy of the hours with the Holy Trinity community or elsewhere, and developed or renewed many other rituals to fortify our faith for the work of love. When it's safe to return fully to our churches on Sundays, I hope the reckoning we're doing now will be reflected in a new way of being together as church as well. Could it be possible that our time reckoning will change how we worship, who we worship with, how we see our communal life? Can we use this time of reckoning to move toward the vision of an 11 a.m. on Sunday morning as the most integrated hour in America instead of the most segregated? Will this time of reckoning lead to the dismantling of clericalism in the Catholic Church that contributed to our sex abuse crisis? Will our reckoning lead to the full inclusion of women, to a restoration of the prophetic role of the church when it comes to caring for each other and for our earth? Will our reckoning challenge the domination by a chosen few and offer instead a new order based on mutuality and interdependence, the solidarity, the brotherhood, and sisterhood that Pope Francis has called for? Many of us miss receiving the Eucharist, but maybe this time of reckoning can lead to a reimagining what communion with one another means, so that we no longer talk about receiving communion or taking communion, but creating communion, participating in communion, being in communion. I reckon we will only know if we try.